Good morning, beautiful people. Welcome to yet another episode of the Younib Breakfast Show with me, Peninah, Wachera. I hope you guys have woken up well and are excited to face your day. Yeah? For me, I'm really excited to start my day and more so of the conversation we're about to have today. So, as it is the norm here at the Younib Breakfast Show, let's go straight to the morning bite of the day. Today we are having a discussion about something that affects more people than we often realize. We are talking about trauma. Now, trauma isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It hides in our habits, in how we respond to conflict, in the things we avoid talking about. And sometimes it lives in our everyday. And sometimes it lives in the stories we carry that no one else sees. Today we are shining light on trauma, and we are joined by our expert. And every time you hear me speaking about our expert, so our very own psychologist, you remember that this show is proudly brought to you by Miss Ashen and Younib organization, and we are trying to reach out to the community to teach you on matters mental health. So if you need any mental health help, you can always call the number 0700-352-250, and our very own psychologist will be able to help you out here. Remember, if you want to also share topics or also give us feedback on this conversation, you can always do that through our social media platforms, Younib_TV on Instagram, Younib Media TV on Facebook, and there's a number on your screen. You can SMS or WhatsApp 0719-144-144. Yeah. So for now, let me just introduce to you our experts of the day. Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you feeling this morning?
Well, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling really excited to be here and to debunk this thing called trauma.
Yeah, karibu sana, and I'm really excited also to learn more about trauma. Yeah. Yes.
I am feeling good. It's a joyful morning, and as always, it's always great to be here to learn.
Okay, just to really quickly introduce you guys, on my left we have Mutembei, Muthami, and on my right we have Beula and Njagi. They are our psychologists here, so if you book a session, you'll be able to find them there to speak to you and also to help you with your mental health journey. Yeah. So today we are having a conversation on trauma. And as we start, what is trauma?
Okay. I can.
Okay, you can.
All right. So I describe trauma as an event or an experience that someone goes through that exceeds their ability to cope with it. And this exceeding the ability to cope with it is what differentiates it from, say, stress, a stressful event. So it's something distressing that happens that unashindwa kucope nayo, and that then brings about a set of symptoms that I'm sure we'll just get into in a few. Yeah, but shortly, yes.
That's what trauma is all about. Yeah. So I hope you guys will be following up on this conversation, and you'll also take notes, because this is a conversation where, again, we hardly speak about, and it's awesome that we are getting to actually debunk it and get to know and understand what trauma truly is. Yeah. So Mutembei, how does trauma really affect us?
So, just as Beula has mentioned, trauma is a stressful event that you don't know how to cope. So naturally, your body is not used to stressful events, and then in the event that a traumatic event happens, you find that your body goes into that fight, flight, or freeze mode. So you either get defensive, either you run, or you just stay. Unaona venye ukishtuliwa sangine unashtukanga tu umesimama tu, unakaa tu statue. Yeah. So in the event that you don't resolve your trauma, you're always in that fight or flight mode, because something might happen, maybe like say a loud noise, and then it triggers something because you're always So you'll find that you're always hyper vigilant at any given point, simply because your body iko tu hapo inajaribu kujua, okay, sasa tuko happy, what is going to happen next, simply because you haven't resolved that trauma.
Okay, awesome. Now we've gotten to understand that. So Beula, what are the different types of trauma?
Right. So when we're talking about different types of trauma, we're mostly looking at the nature of the event and the duration of time. And so with that, we have what we call acute trauma, which is a single event that has happened just the once, that you have either witnessed or experienced. And so, for example, that could be, say, an accident or a physical assault or something of that nature. Then we have chronic trauma, which is a traumatic event that is prolonged, or you're still in that environment for quite some time. And so when we look at, say, areas that are very war-torn, you find that a lot of people there have chronic trauma because of being constantly in that space of that traumatic event or experience. Then we have complex trauma, whereby you have a multiple, different traumatic experiences that are happening over a prolonged time as well. But it's often said that for complex trauma, it's something that often happens in childhood, because the complexity of it is even, who it is coming from. So say a child that's either been abused or being neglected by a caregiver, and that's something that's happening for quite some time, may actually grow up now with the symptoms, or may grow up with the symptoms of trauma in that way.
Okay. Now that we've gotten to understand the different types of trauma, Mutembei, what are the common signs of unresolved trauma?
I'll begin with the hypervigilance, because if you find yourself that you're always aware of everything that is going on, let's say you're always constantly looking for a safe space, or let's say you're looking for danger zones, that means that maybe it could be like a symptom or a telltale that you could be traumatic. You could be traumatized. Also find yourself you're not able to deal with emotions, simply because, let's say, you get something happens, or you're faced with maybe a person or an event, and it takes you back to a point where maybe to the point of the trauma when it happened. Let's say you find that you grew up in an abusive home. So you'll find that every single time somebody confronts you, or every single time it feels like you've been confronted for something, it takes you back there. So mtu anakuja na kuuliza swali, wewe unasema akili yako inarudi inakuwa defensive. So you're not able to process emotions as the way you're supposed to, simply because there's so much that has been pent up and you didn't get to address that. There are different ways in which trauma can manifest in a person. So we'll just break it down kidogo, and then maybe we'll get deeper into it. So I'll start with behavioral. So in the event that somebody is traumatized, you'll find that they're not able to deal with certain situations the way a normal person would. Let's say they are going to avoid certain places, they're going to avoid certain foods, they're going to avoid certain situations that inawakumbusha kuhusu what happened in the past that they didn't get to properly manage. There's also, in terms of the relationships, you'll find that some people are going to withdraw simply because there's so much that they're dealing with, and they don't have that capacity to cope. So naturally, they're going to withdraw themselves socially. You'll find that they were like, apana. One moment alikuwa sawa, then the other time hataki kuongea, hataki kutoka kwa nyumba, hataki kufanya nini, something that it just affects the relationships. Unabaki unashanga kunaenda aje hapa. There's also in terms of like your mental processes, you find that you're having trouble remembering things, you have trouble concentrating on tasks. You just akili yako is not very settled, so because it's trying to like process what happened, you also find that unataka kuendelea kufanya vitu, so in as much as you're there, you're actually not there. So you'll have trouble concentrating, you'll have trouble maybe even sleeping, you'll have trouble eating, because there's just so much that is preoccupied in your mind that you just don't have the ability to cope. And this also makes me, so you'll find that some people are also easily startled, simply because any single, let's say a loud sound, or somebody just tapped them, they get taken away from that mental space where they're like so deep in thought. So unapata unaenda umeguza mtu, alafu unapata ameshtuka tu, because now that's the body trying to respond to that pent up trauma, that pent up energy that has not been addressed.
Okay, awesome. I hope now we've gotten to understand the symptoms or the common signs that we may be able to look up for and know, okay, this might be trauma. Remember, it's not good to actually self-diagnose. Yeah, if you feel like you have something that is similar to the signs that have been mentioned, it is really, really important for you to seek mental health guidance so that they may be able to tell you, okay, this is trauma. Okay, this is this. Yeah, so that because self-diagnosis will always make you be stressed for nothing. And at the end of the day, maybe you diagnose yourself with something wrong and it's not really the case. Yeah. So remember, it's important for you to seek medical help. Remember, we usually do this for free. So if you need any session, you can always book our psychologist through the number 0700-352-250. And we are going for a short break. And before that, I want to ask you or leave you with a question. Have you ever recognized signs of trauma in yourself or somebody close to you? Which was it? Please let us know through our social media platforms, and we'll be back sampling some of them. Welcome back. This is still the Younib Breakfast Show, and I'll just go straight to sampling your feedback here. So the first one says, yes, in myself, I used to brush off how jumpy and anxious I'd get in certain situations, but now I understand that it was my body reminding me, remembering things before my mind did. Okay. Next one, definitely in a close friend. She was always on edge and avoided talking about certain topics. I didn't realize it was trauma until I started learning more about it. Someone else says, both, honestly. I've seen it in how I react to conflict, like I freeze up. And also in my mom, she never talks about her past, but carries so much tension all the time. I'll sample another one. Yes, in my partner, he had trouble sleeping and will get triggered by things that seemed small to me. Now I see it was connected to childhood trauma. So thank you for your feedback. I have more, but because of time, allow me to just sample those ones. Yeah. So thank you so much for your feedback. And I'd like us to just go straight to maybe our expert here in studio. Do you have any comments of the feedback that I've read?
Well, maybe something that came up to me. One of our viewers, they mentioned that the boyfriend used to get startled, get triggered, trouble sleeping. And yeah, that is also a symptom of trauma. Because you see, your body is always on fight or flight. You know, you're always hyper vigilant, which means hata ukienda kulala bado uko rada. Au ni watu wamelala, unapata kikombe ilianguka, ameamka. You know? Mti kuna
Mti imeanguka.
anasikia mti usiku kunanyesha, mti imepiga kelele, anaamka. So yeah, so we find that trouble sleeping is also a sign of deeply rooted and unresolved trauma.
Awesome. You have any comment?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the first thing is to thank them for sharing that with us. Yeah, but also we could look at how there's something to see there in terms of how a lot of the symptoms or a lot of the descriptions being given are very closely related with anxiety. There's that one who was saying she was jumpy, she was, and she couldn't realize, but those are symptoms that we could actually pick out and fit into anxiety. So it's something worth noting that when trauma happens, it's very easy for it to manifest as anxiety, to manifest as depression, to manifest as, sometimes chronic stress. You just think you're stressed. But as you've said, it's very important to seek some professional help with that, to take it to a therapy room where we're able to process it, to call it what it is, and therefore work our way through it. Yeah.
So thank you again for your feedback. It is usually helpful because we get to learn from each other. Yeah. So Beula, how can trauma really show up differently in children versus in adults?
Right. So maybe I can describe how it shows up in children. I'm still having an internal debate about whether it's that much differently or it's just that it's noticeable because they're children. So for children, you'll notice a change in behavior, obviously. So that means either they used to be social, now they're not, or they start showing up with behaviors that they didn't have before. So they could become more aggressive, or have really, those attention-seeking behaviors. They could begin to manifest as such. You'd also have, they'd have trouble concentrating. So if they're school-going children, you'd find that they are having trouble in school. They're not able to keep up or to concentrate with what's happening. They're not able to make friends or keep up with the friendships that they had. So they'd isolate a bit as well. And then an important thing to look out for is in play, because play is the language of children. It helps them talk about what they don't have the language to articulate. So with play, you'd notice certain things, you'd be able to pick certain things. For example, if a child during play, yanataka tu kucheza tunawana, perhaps this is a child who's been exposed to violence. If a child has been exposed to other forms of abuse, say sexual abuse, you would see that in play. They'd make the dollies sleep on top of each other. They would basically give you their story through play. And so you'd be able to also tell there. One other thing that's important to note is regressive behaviors. So if this child had hit certain developmental milestones, for example, ameanza kutembea, if they're very small children, they'd stop walking and go back to crawling. If they had, grown to that point of independence where I don't need to be by my mom's side kila time, I can run off and make friends, you'd notice that they'd get more clingy. If they had stopped bedwetting, you'd notice that they're back to bedwetting. Some of them may even go back to sucking the thumb and just doing those self-soothing behaviors that they had developmentally outgrown. Yeah. And when we say that, there's a bit of the same within adults. It's just that it might present itself differently. There's a theory in psychology by Sigmund Freud, by Sigmund Freud, where he breaks down life's developmental stages into various things that you do. And so he says that, adults who are stuck on, say, drinking or smoking, are adults who got stuck in their oral phase. They did not outgrow that. And the oral phase developmentally is where you're learning how to breastfeed, how to latch properly, and then how to also wean, when you start eating food. And so when we take what he's saying and look at an adult who probably has gone through a very stressful situation or a traumatic event, and they resort to drinking or substance abuse, we can compare it in that sense, if we're using that theory, to like a regression, because he's not sucking his thumb, but he is using his mouth to self-soothe or to find a calming way. So there is a difference, but I think the core of it, in terms of how children and how adults present with trauma, is essentially at the most basic level, it's the same. It's just the presentation of it differs because of that age issue and experience issue and exposure issue. Yeah.
Okay, I hope we've gotten to understand that, because we've been explained to as children. Yeah, now we know better of what really we can see or how we can differentiate. Mostly, if you're a parent out there, now you know how you can see your children behaving, and you say, okay, this person may have trauma. Yeah, and now it will help you be able to move forward and maybe seek medical help for this child. Yeah, so I hope we are taking notes. Yeah. So Mutembei, are there cultural or societal differences in how trauma really manifests?
Definitely, yes. Just by the virtue of us having different cultures, that means that we have different ways of living life, which means that we also have different way of doing things. So naturally, there are things that a certain community is going to do that other people from a different community may look at it as a traumatic event. For example, you'll find that there's some communities in our country that when in the event that somebody passes, the day before they go to lay them to rest, you'll find that the body is going to be transported back home. Some cultures so you'll find that in some communities they expect that let's say if it was the husband who was passed, the wife is expected to sleep in the same house as the corpse. You'll find that there are communities who hiyo siku ya matanga, hiyo siku ya mwisho ya matanga, they have the body, the corpse is displayed to the public in the event that anybody wants to view it. So you have an open casket for anybody to view. For some communities, especially people who live in urban areas, they might get to see that and they're like, hey, hizi ni gani tena? Yeah. So what is generalized as a norm for one community might actually prove to be very traumatic for another community. And same goes with culture. So you'll find that there's some certain ways that people do their things that might actually be very traumatizing to other people. So yeah.
Okay, so I hope now we've gotten to learn more about that when it comes to cultural differences and also our society. Yeah. So Beula, why do some people seem more resilient than others after traumatic episodes?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Remember when we were describing or defining trauma, we said that trauma is something that happens that inazidi ability yako ya kucope, right?
Yeah.
So all of us here, we've had different, experiences as children. We've had different caregivers growing up who have also had very different experiences. And so there are certain things that we each got from our different families. And so if a traumatic experience happens here, say we were all in a car, got an accident, because we're all so different, we also have different thresholds of coping. So we cannot really say that some people are more resilient in the face of trauma because perhaps for them, it did not exceed their capacity to cope, right? Remember what we called trauma is we're not naming the accident as trauma. We're naming the situation that imezidi ability yako ya kuamini, oh my God, I was in an accident. So if something like that happens, you might find because of where I'm at in my coping abilities, I might be getting nightmares from today, 3 months down the line, I'm still having nightmares. You may look very shocked in the moment, very shocked throughout the week, but by next week, umeingia kwa gari. Mutembei may say, nijikute karibu na gari hata kwa barabara. He might isolate and lock himself.
Yeah.
Or, again, because we have different thresholds of coping. So I think I'd attribute it to that. Resilience is something that is built based off of how, first of all, we have observed people around us dealing with difficult times. It's based off of the support systems that we also have and the coping abilities that we utilize. And so we might find that, again, having been through the same experience, if I keep quiet about it and never talk about it, I might struggle with it for longer, as opposed to someone who goes for therapy and begins to process it. And so they may look like they're coping better, and they are, but it's because they sought help. They employed coping skills that actually worked better than, say, someone else who decided to isolate, or who couldn't move past it, or who sought, drugs and alcohol or reckless behavior as a way to cope with it. So it comes back down to your coping abilities. Yeah.
Awesome.
Manageable. Sorry,
So I hope we are still following on when it comes to this conversation. And I hope also, guys, you may be able to continue sending your feedback on the question of the day, which is, have you ever experienced, or have you ever had a friend who has experienced trauma, and how did you know it was trauma? Yeah, you can let us know through our social media platforms. For now, let's take this short break and we'll be back with more. Welcome back. This is still the Younib Breakfast Show, and this show is proudly brought to you by Miss Ashan and Younib Organization, and we're trying to reach out to the community to teach you on matters mental health. So if you need any psychological help, you can always call the number 0700-352-250, and our very own psychologist will be able to help you out here. So coming back to the conversation, can trauma be generational?
It definitely can. Because you see, the thing is, we usually say that we are a product of our nurture. This means that the way we see our siblings reacting, our elder siblings, the same way we look at our parents, our grandparents, we embody whatever it is that they have going on for themselves. So you'll find that in the event that maybe somebody got parented inappropriately, that's what they know, that's their truth. So they are going to do the same to their children, and then that's their children's truth. And then the children do the same to their children. So you'll find that patterns of association, patterns of behavior, parenting styles, they're passed on from one generation to the next. And sometimes, because we are all operating at a point in life where we don't know, there's no manual. So the same way your parent or your mom parented you, that's your normal, that's your baseline. So you'll find that you'll also pick up traits that your mom has, and then you're going to pass them over to your children.
Yeah.
So let's say a parent got traumatized at one point, they're going to parent their children from a point of trauma. So it's without them knowing, they're going to pass over that trauma, and then they're going to pass over coping skills to the children that they feel they feel like they are doing good for them, but they're not. So you'll find that it keeps going down, down, down up until the point where it's really popular. Let's break these transgenerational traumas.
Yeah.
So up until somebody decides, this is not working out for me, let's break it. It will keep on being passed down.
Now that we've gotten to understand what trauma is and signs that we can be able to look out for so that we can know whether we have trauma or not, I'd like us now to go to our healthy way. So what are the healthy ways of coping, Beula?
That's a good question. We always emphasize on talking, right? And if sometimes you feel like you're not, we are advocating here, we're shouting here, come for therapy, please. But even if you feel, or even as you're doing therapy, it's still important to have friends that you can talk to. So I will summarize that as, having a safe space is a very, very important thing, very healing thing when we're talking about trauma. Safe people who can listen to you, who can hold you when you need to be held, in terms of when you're feeling like those flashbacks or those emotions from the event are really coming up, that you can allow yourself to feel them around safe people. And this also works very well for children. Children just need to have a safe person, a safe environment, and a predictable routine that anajua nikiamka, I do this, then I sleep at this time. It really helps their mind reset what has happened. And it's also, it also is very effective for adults. So after that, because a lot of the times is we get a traumatic experience, or we learn about something traumatic. Mutembei talked about, burials. Sometimes, not even sometimes, losing someone is actually a traumatic experience. If we were to classify it in the types, we would call it an acute trauma. And what happens when, for example, we say we've received the news of the passing on of a loved one, is that tunatokanga, like life feels like you don't know what is real or what is not, that feeling. And it's like you're living in a weird balanced state. And at that time, it's very easy for routine to be thrown out the window. But now we are trying to say, no, bring routine back, because it can help you feel grounded, feel like there's something you can actually depend on, there's something safe that you can trust, and that's the routine. So having that safe environment, having a routine. We're talking about learning grounding techniques. Again, therapy is a nice place to learn that. But we've also mentioned a few of them in the course of the shows, whereby even just going to a green place and you sit on the grass, or you walk barefoot on the grass and you ground yourself, can help you really start to identify what is real, what is not, especially if you're someone who is experiencing a lot of those, flashbacks or those intrusive thoughts and intrusive memories. So learning those grounding techniques, sometimes counting back from 10, 20, 100, all the way down to 0, or doing the one that we've talked about, where you name things that you can see, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell or touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. And that's just bringing your awareness back to, okay, what is happening now? And so that all, of course, pairs very well with deep breathing or mindfulness exercises, where you're just trying to, let's just come back to now. Let's come back to now. Let's train our minds to come back, to stop living in that event that happened and come back to now. But yeah, I would say, to summarize all that, the chief of it, please just come for therapy. Seek professional help. It may not be with us, but seek a professional, somebody to talk to that can help you actually process the events of what happened to you. And then you can begin from there and gain a lot of other skills from there.
Okay, awesome. So, Mutembei, with the shortest time possible, yeah, please tell us, how does healing or healing from trauma really look like?
Okay, just as Beula has said, okay, so just as Beula has mentioned, it's okay to seek therapy, because sometimes you, just as we had also mentioned earlier, trauma is something that happens to you, then you're not able to cope. So healing starts with you talking about it, communicating your emotions, communicating your feelings about whatever it is that maybe happened. So So yeah, naturally, I would say healing starts with conversation. It looks like conversation. It looks like being intentional. Seeking help where you feel like hapa nimekwama kidogo, but also generally also accepting the fact that we faced a traumatic event and it happened. There's nothing we can't go back to the past and change it. Now we can move forward. So now that also the healing part comes in with whatever Beula has mentioned in regards to talking about it. So yeah, maybe just to sum it up, I would say healing looks like being intentional about it, about the trauma, recognizing that it's there and taking charge of the situation and moving forward.
Okay, awesome. And to finalize, Beula, please kindly look at the camera and give advice to somebody who is like, okay, you're telling us to seek therapy, yeah? And I'm not somebody who is used to opening up. I'm not somebody who thinks therapy is an option. There are people who say, okay, therapy, why should I actually go for it? So to help me tackle my trauma, why should I really go for therapy that you're really insisting on?
Right. Okay. So perhaps I may begin by telling you what worked for me. My selling point for therapy was like, him to sijui. This is someone whom I don't know. This is someone who does not know my people or would literally have no one to report anything I say in that room to. And that brings about safety. And so, of course, there is confidentiality when you come to a therapist with, whatever it is that you're coming with. And we also keep saying a problem shared is a problem half solved. We're getting to unburden. You're getting someone to ask you questions, to actually sit with what happened in the room with you and the emotions of that in a safe environment, a place where, you're not going to be judged for what you experienced or how you dealt with it. It's just simply saying your truth as it is and sitting with it and embracing it. And that's very important in what we call acceptance. That's very key in actually helping you to move on. So I don't know if that selling point works for you, but it worked for me. The fact that this is someone who you don't know, they don't know you, they don't know, the people around you or your family. They're basically strangers who have been trained, who have the skills to be able to help you process those hard things. And once you're done, whatever has been spoken in that room remains in that room. And you can just leave it there and go and live your life and come back next week and look at it again. And it's very important. It's a huge part in beginning to heal, beginning to move forward, beginning to build those coping skills that we're talking about. Yeah.
I hope that serves as a motivation for you to call the number, 0700-352-250. Yeah, if you want to book a session with our psychologist, that's the number to call, so that you can also take the first step. Yeah, because we're always told it's the first step that matters. Yeah, whatever that will follow, which is healing, by the way, will be able to help you become better, and that is how you'll see yourself in a healing era, in a recovered era when it comes to traumatic event. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming and helping us expound more on trauma, and I hope all of us have gotten the opportunity to learn and to also understand what trauma can do to you and also what trauma is all about. So asanteni sana, we couldn't have done that without you guys here. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, and to you viewers, I hope that you've been able to enjoy this conversation. Remember, you can always give us feedback here when it comes to whatever you feel, and mostly this discussion. Yeah, we are opening it up for you to be able to actually share. Even if the show is not on air, you can continue sharing your experiences and also tell us now if this show has been of help to you. Okay, and before I sum it up, I'd like to send my gratitude to everyone who has made this show a success. Thank you so much, Elias Mujina, for being our director and also our camera person. Asante sana. To our set designer, Rafael Wangila, asante sana for the good work you've been doing. Yeah, until next time, do have yourselves a very, very productive day ahead. Goodbye.